Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel. In this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the conflict on the territory of Ukraine, where during the night between the 24th and the 25th of April of 2026 seems that the Russians carried out the biggest attack, at least one of the biggest attacks since the beginning of the special military operation. And these are the numbers that were provided by pro-Ukrainian sources, and according to these numbers, the Russians during the night used 666 air vehicles, missiles and drones altogether. The Ukrainians managed to destroy just 580 drones. According to information, we have 26 cruise missiles of Ha-101 type and 4 caliber ballistic missiles. So during the night we received lots of updates on this matter. We have lots of maps where we can see the approximate roads of attacks. As you can see, according to these maps, the Russians used drones, hundreds of drones, around 600 or even more drones. The Russians used the ballistic missiles of Iskander type, probably up to 20 or something like this, and the Russians used up to 30 missiles of cruise missiles of Ha-101 type. The most important thing is that the Russians during the night between the 24th and the 25th of April didn't use the hypersonic missiles, and which means that the Russians still have reserves, still have resources to repeat a massive attack during the upcoming night between the 25th and the 26th of April of 2026. So we have this picture. We can see that the Russians attacked mainly the city of Dnipro during the night, and during this morning we received lots of updates, dozens of videos, dozens of pictures of the Russian attack, lots of explosions. We received lots of updates about attacks in the area of the city of Odessa, and lots of explosions were recorded around the city of Kyiv and the city of Kharkiv. Now let's discuss everything in details, and first let's discuss and let's try to understand how exactly the Russians were attacking the territory of Ukraine and how exactly the Russians were moving through the night. According to information we have, the Russian attack started around at 9 p.m. of the local time. And first we started receiving different pictures from different pro-Ukrainian sources, where we can see the approximate positions of the Russian drones that were flying over the territory of Ukraine. But telling the truth, nothing special was recorded between 9 p.m. and basically 12 a.m. of the Ukrainian time. Just dozens of drones that were flying over the territory of Ukraine and nothing special. But somewhere around at 12 a.m. or between 12 a.m. and 1 a.m. of the 25th of April of 2026, we start receiving first reports that the Russians began their major massive attack. And during the next 2 hours, we were receiving lots of updates of how the Russians, using basically hundreds of drones, were attacking different regions of Ukraine. And the first region of Ukraine that was attacked by the Russians significantly was the Odessa region. And here we can see a picture with approximate positions of the Russian drones over the Black Sea, and here we can see probably up to 30 or even 40 drones that were moving in the direction of the Odessa region. So, and later we start receiving additional updates on this matter of how the Russian drones, dozens of Russian drones, were approaching the Odessa region. Here we can see the moments when the Russian drones entered the Odessa region, and we see no resistance from the Ukrainian side, and then we start receiving updates that the Russian drones began disappearing over the Odessa region. And according to the latest geolocations, we can say that the Russians were attacking the most southwestern parts of the Odessa region, basically the territory between the villages and the cities of Izmail and Reni, the territories where the Ukrainian port infrastructure that the Ukrainians use for the military logistic purposes. And right after the end of this first wave of attack that ended basically somewhere at 2 a.m. of the 25th of April of 2026, the Ukrainians launched the second wave of attack, and this time the Ukrainian drones were moving in the direction of the Kyiv region and in the direction of the city by the name of Bilytske. And here we can see also lots of drones, dozens of drones that were moving from the area of the Bryansk and the Kursk regions, and they were moving in the direction of the city of Kyiv and the Kyiv region, and trying to outflank the city of Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine, from the south. And this attack took place between and around 3 a.m. So somewhere between before and somewhere before the 3 a.m. and ended around at 20 minutes past 3 a.m. So a lots of drones were recorded, as you can see, and this is exactly the moment. So somewhere around at 4 a.m. of the 25th of April of 2026, the Russians began using cruise missiles, and we start receiving these updates. Lots of cruise missiles were entering the territory Ukraine, and the most important thing is that these cruise missiles first, according to information we have, were moving in the western direction. So lots of cruise missiles of Ha-101 type were launched probably somewhere from the area of the southern Russia, from the area of Krasnodar Krai. And these dozens of missiles answered first the Nikolaev region, then these missiles moved in the Odessa region, and of course probably the Ukrainians supposed that these missiles would continue their flight along the border with Moldova and Transnistria in the western direction with the purpose to attack objects of energy infrastructure somewhere in the western parts of Ukraine. But at the moment when the Russians approached the Transnistria, the border with Transnistria, the Russian missiles changed its course, and they changed their course significantly. They turned back basically 118 degrees in the eastern direction, and the Russian missiles began moving in the direction of the city of Dnipro and in the direction of the Kyiv region. And we are talking about Ha-101 missiles, and according to the Minister of Defense of Ukraine, most of them were destroyed by the armed forces of Ukraine. So this is the attack, and this is exactly what was happening during the night. Now let's discuss additional details and additional updates. Once again, this is the picture that was published by pro-Ukrainian sources, and according to this picture, the city of Dnipro, the city of Kharkiv, and the city of Kyiv and the Odessa region were attacked by the Russians, and we have lots of videos on this matter. As for the city of Kyiv, this morning we received a report about explosions in the southern parts of the city, but and more precisely, by the time I started making this video, I hadn't received anything on this matter. Maybe during the day we will receive additional geolocations and videos about attacking the direction of the city of Kyiv, and then we will discuss everything in the evening, what exactly the Russians were attacking. As for the Kyiv region, we have a video that was published from the area of the settlement of Bilytske, and the Russian drones as well as the Russian missiles of Ha-101 type were moving through this area. And according to information we have, the Russians attacked a substation which is located to the east of the city of Bilytske, and this morning local sources made a video, recorded the situation in this area, and here we can see a black smoke over this substation. So this territory was attacked, and furthermore we received satellite data about fire anomalies, and a fire anomaly was also recorded in the area of the substation. So this target was attacked by Russians. As for the city of Odessa, during the previous 12 hours, during the previous night, as we discussed, the settlement was attacked, but telling the truth, we haven't received anything in this morning about these attacks, about the port infrastructure. Probably during the day we will receive lots of updates, and then we will discuss everything in details. Now let's talk about the city of Dnipro, and this settlement was attacked probably with every single type of weapon that the Russians have. During the previous night and this morning we received probably hundreds of videos and hundreds of pictures on this matter. According to information we have, the Russians mainly were attacking the southern parts of the city of Dnipro, and these are the first videos that were published by local sources. Smoke, black smokes over black sources, two sources of black smoke we can see through the southern parts of the settlement, and the sources are saying that the Russians attacked this oil base of Ukraine in the southwestern parts of the city of Dnipro, and this oil base almost in the same area. Furthermore, according to information we have, the Russians attacked the industrial zone that is located between these two oil bases, and this is the video right after the Russians attacked one of these oil bases in the southwestern parts of Dnipro. Here we have pictures that were published somewhere around at 6 a.m. We can see the city of Dnipro overnight from different angles. Lots of explosions, lots of fire. Some buildings were damaged. Here we can see another oil base that was destroyed. Later we received another video, and according to information we have, the Russians attacked not just these oil bases, but the sources reported that the Russians destroyed a gas station which is located also in the southern parts of the city of Dnipro. And in this video, for example, we can see the moments when the Russians attacked a gas station in the southwestern parts of the city of Dnipro, basically in the Dnipro suburb. And in this video we can see the consequences of attack. As you can see, there is a park with vehicles, with trucks that most likely were destroyed, and this is the gas station itself that was attacked by Russians with missiles. The gas station, as you can see, was completely destroyed. And you know that these days the Russians are attacking gas stations of Ukraine through the entire territory. We received similar updates from the area of the city of Sumy. Now we see that the Russians are destroying gas stations in the area of the city of Dnipro, and we can understand back because these days both the Russians and the Ukrainians have very heavy clashes in the Zaporozhye direction, and the cities like Zaporozhye and Dnipro are the nearest and the closest big cities in this area where the Ukrainians most likely keep their oil, where the Ukrainians have their oil storages, fuel storages, and so on. So which means that the Russians most likely are tasked to destroy the Ukraine's logistic capabilities with the purpose not to allow the Ukrainians to bring fuel to the line of combat contact. As you can see, the situation is very difficult in this area, and this is the city of Dnipro this morning on the 25th of April of 2026, where you can see black smoke over the settlement, and this is most likely the consequences of attack on the gas station and on oil bases in the southwestern parts of the settlement. So lots of cars, lots of vehicles, people are moving to their jobs while the Russians were attacking objects of energy and the logistic infrastructure. The sources are saying that this attack during the previous night, the biggest attack with the use of around 666 drones and missiles together, was something like a retaliatory strike from the Russian side, and the Russians were attacking the Ukrainians due to the disaster that the Ukrainians created in the area of the city of Tuapse. We're not talking just about the Tuapse refinery that was almost completely probably destroyed. We're talking about these videos. Here we can see how the Russians were trying to clean up of oil spill on the Black Sea coast in Tuapse and the river of the same time. So we have also ecological disaster that was created as a result of attack on the Tuapse oil refinery, and most likely the situation here will remain difficult and tense many days, and obviously it will take a lot of time before the Russians are able to clear the territory and the shore of the city of Tuapse in the Black Sea. So most likely these strikes are connected. Basically the Russians struck back due to the situation in the area of Tuapse. But the Russians wasn't the only side who attacked massively during the previous night. According to information we have, the Ukrainians also attacked the territory of the Russian Federation, and there were at least 2 waves of attacks. The Ukrainians launched lots of drones in the northern direction towards the city of Moscow, and the Ukrainians launched lots of drones in the southeastern direction. And obviously the Ukrainians were attacking in these 2 directions just to distract the attention of the Russians and not so allow the Russians to understand which of these waves is a primary wave. And later, probably several hours later, we received additional updates on this matter, and somewhere at the beginning of the 25th of April of 2026, it became clear what is the main direction and what exactly the Ukrainians were planning to achieve. This picture was published by pro-Ukrainian sources, and here we can see the approximate routes of Ukrainian attack. The sources reported that the Ukrainians used up to 250 drones and jet drones to attack the territory of the Russian Federation, and overnight we received the reports that explosions were recorded on the territory of the city of Lugansk. Furthermore, we received a very interesting report that the Ukrainians during the previous night managed to hit the settlement of Yekaterinburg, which is located 2,000 kilometers from from the area of Ukraine. So if we assume that this is a launching point in the southern parts of Kharkiv region, then the distance to the city of Yekaterinburg would be around 2 kilometers. Once again, this is the settlement of Yekaterinburg, and this is the approximate position of a launching site. So 1,800 kilometers crossed the Ukrainians' drones to attack the settlement. We're not talking about a massive attack because, according to information we have, just several drones were recorded over the settlement of Yekaterinburg, and it seems that the Ukrainians basically were testing their capabilities and their technologies, and they were testing another important thing, the situation with the air defense of the Russian forces in this direction. So the Ukrainians tested the Yekaterinburg direction, which means that in coming days the Ukrainians may repeat their attacks in this direction, because now the Ukrainians most likely understand the status of the Russian air defense forces along this road of attack, along these roads of attack. So in coming days, most likely both the Russians and the Ukrainians will repeat attacks and strikes on the objects of military, critical and energy infrastructure of each other. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation on the ground. During the previous 12 hours, we received lots of very important updates. And first, let's talk about the Dobropillia direction, because probably one of the most important updates are coming exactly from this area. The Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to improve their positions in the area of the settlement of Grishina. And these are the changes on the ground between the dates. The Russians took under complete control a stronghold to the northwest of the settlement, and the Russians, according to the most important thing and the most important detail, according to pro-Ukrainian sources, also answered the settlement of Alexandriivka. So the Russians crossed the river barrier in this area, Balka Vtoroy Yar, and answered the village, and now the Russians are trying to create a foothold on the Ukrainian side of this natural barrier with the purpose to have positions for concentration and before moving further in the northern and the northwestern directions. Another important video is coming from the area of the city of Rodinska, from its western parts, and in this video we can see how Russians were attacking positions and troops of the armed forces of Ukraine in the western parts of the settlement. Furthermore, the situation in this area was confirmed partially by pro-Ukrainian sources. It seems that the Ukrainians still have strong control over the Zaporozhskaya mine, over this territory, and it seems that the Ukrainians still have possibilities to send their troops and to control the most western parts of the settlement of Rodinske, which is connected with the Zaporozhskaya mine through this line. So which means that despite these infiltration zones, we see that the Ukrainians still control over this territory and still have some certain control over this area. A bit further to the north, during the previous 12 hours, several pro-Russian sources stated that as a result of clashes, the armed forces of the Russian Federation managed to establish complete control over the settlement by the name of Belitske. And based on the report that was published by a pro-Russian source, we have adjusted the map. So once again, this is the situation by the end of the 24th of April of 2026. The settlement of Rodinska was under complete Russian control. The settlement, the Zaporozhskaya mine, was colored as the territory under Ukraine control, but with additional infiltration areas. And today we receive updates and we have a different picture. The Ukrainians have strong control over the mine. The Ukrainians have control over the western part of Rodinska, but the Russians, according to information we have, captured the settlement of Bilitske. So these are the changes and this is the situation on the ground, and this is a very important update because now the Russians are ready to continue their offensive operation, first in the direction of these villages to the south of Dobropillia. We're talking about Svetla, Vodianska, Chernigovka, and Dobropillia, the village, Novogrishna, and so on. And then from these positions, the Russians will continue offensive operation towards the settlement of Dobropillia itself with the purpose to establish complete control over the territory and to answer the operational space with the purpose to establish complete control over the northwestern parts of the Donetsk region. So the battle for Dobropillia will start very soon. Now let's talk about the Kostiantynivka direction. During the previous night, additional changes were recorded to the southwest of the settlement. The Russians, according to pro-Russian sources, managed to establish complete control over the road of 520 between the settlements of Dobropillia and Kostiantynivka. The Russians used to have control over these territories, but then the Ukrainians counterattacked several weeks ago, and the Ukrainians managed to restore the logistics, and now the Russians counterattacked or attacked once again, and the Russians managed to cut this road physically once again. It seems that the battle for Dobropillia will start very soon, and I would like to remind you that these days the Russians were actively proposing and suggesting the Ukrainians to surrender in this area by spreading different instructions with drones and so on. Now let's talk about the Sloviansk direction. We have another additional changes, very interesting changes. We have a video published by pro-Ukrainian sources, and in this video we can see how the Ukrainians, how FPV drone operators of the armed forces of Ukraine were attacking positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation along the Seversky Donetsk-Donbass canal, but on the Ukrainian side of this canal. So these are the changes on the ground between the dates. If you remember, just yesterday pro-Ukrainian sources confirmed that indeed there is a progress on the ground from the Russian side, from the Russian sabotage and reconnaissance groups, and these are the changes between the 22nd and the 25th of April. As you can see, we have huge changes on the ground, and today we received updates that indeed confirm Russian control and the Russian presence on this side of canal. Furthermore, we have additional infiltration areas added by pro-Ukrainian sources. As we discussed in the previous videos, it seems that the Russians are trying to test the Ukraine's defense in the area of the villages of Malinovka and Tikhonovka, and the Russians are tasked to capture these villages, probably even before moving further in the direction of the settlement of Kramatorsk from the east. It seems that the Russians prepared some kind of a sort of surprise for the Ukrainians, and now the Russians are trying to complete this task. Another important update is that the Russians, according to pro-Ukrainian sources, have answered the most central part of the settlement of Alexandrovka. Probably the Russians and pro-Ukrainian sources are saying about sabotage and reconnaissance groups. So first, groups of Russian forces answered the settlement from the central part. I would like to remind you that during the previous days we discussed that the Russians answered the settlement of Alexandrovka also from the northeast. So the battle is taking place for the village itself, and if Ukrainians lose control over the settlement of Alexandrovka, we can say about the beginning of the final phase of the battle for the Sloviansk-Kramatorsk agglomeration. So because it's going to be already the moment when the Russians will answer the agglomeration itself. As for the northern directions, Kharkiv directions, during the previous 12 hours, we haven't received anything special. Probably the most important update was published by more or less reliable pro-Russian source, and according to this source, during the previous days, the Russians managed to improve their position significantly around the settlement of Borova, and according to this source, everything along this red line and inside of this, let's say, pocket is already under complete Russian control. So the Russians during the previous days managed to take these territories under complete control, and I would like to remind you that several days ago the chief of the general staff of the armed forces of the Russian Federation, Valery Gerasimov, stated that indeed currently the clashes are taking place on the territory of the city of Borova itself. So no, this is probably the reality, this might be the reality, that the Russians, after they finish the battle for the eastern bank of the river Oskol, shift their focus in the southern direction. Now the Russians are trying to take under complete control the central Kupiansk direction, the territory between the village of Borova and the settlement of Studenok. So this territory most likely currently is the primary target for the Russians. They are trying to establish complete control over the territory along the river Oskol, at least along its eastern bank. So as you can see, the situation is quite complicated. May holidays is going to start very soon. Most likely before the May holidays, we will see a very big activity from the Russian side. Then we'll see a short pause in the Russian actions, and right after the end of the May holidays, the Russians will resume their offensives along the entire line of combat contact, and will receive lots of updates, most likely in May, about this situation. And that's it for the short video. The Military Summary channel reminds that we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.